Do you know that feeling when the whole world is falling apart? When the person you trust the most just erases your future? I've been through it. The pain was so unbearable that I thought I would not survive. But years later, I realized that it was the most important event in my life. 5 years ago, my friend stole my boyfriend, a very successful lawyer. Yesterday, at the wedding of mutual acquaintances, she appeared with him, boastfully sparkling with diamonds. The poor thing has always been a loser, and we live in style, I gracefully retorted. Meet my fiance. Hello, friends. Put your business aside for a moment. I want to share a story that may make you take a fresh look at your inner circle, right in the comments where you're watching us from. I wish you a pleasant listening experience. Crystal glasses tinkled, sparkling wine flowed freely, and the ballroom of the Plaza Court Hotel throbbed with live music and general fun. I stood at the snack table, nervously adjusting the strap of my dress and trying to cope with the sudden attack of dryness in my throat. 5 years. For the past 5 years, I have been mentally preparing for this meeting, replaying its scenario in my head, rehearsing every response word. And here they are. Brenda, my former best friend, was beaming in the center of the room in a creamy designer outfit that probably cost the equivalent of an average Cleveland resident's 6-month salary. She was festooned with jewelry like a Christmas tree. Her blonde hair, gathered in an elegant high style, seemed to reflect the light of all the chandeliers at the same time. Next to her is Jared, tall, trim, in an immaculately tailored tuxedo with a fashionable, narrow tie. My Jared. Or rather, it hasn't been mine for a long time. From my corner, I watched them smile tightly at the guests, accepting congratulations as if it were their own wedding, and not a celebration on the occasion of the wedding of Katie's sister, our friend Dana. I used to know every wrinkle on his face, every habit he had. He looked more prosperous now, more self-confident, but something in his gaze seemed to have faded. Or was it just my desire to think that way? Dana, a mutual friend of ours from our student days at the University of Texas, noticed me and hurried over. We haven't seen each other for almost a year, but she hasn't changed much. Still the same shock of red hair and a sprinkling of freckles. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Are you holding up? I had no idea they would be. Honestly, I swear they weren't on the list. It was Katie's mother-in-law who expanded her guest list at the last moment. It's okay, I smiled with feigned calmness, even though my heart was beating like a racing motor. Sooner or later, it had to happen. New York seems huge, but our social circle is the same. I took a sip of champagne, feeling the fizzy bubbles tickle my palate. Through the crowd of guests, I caught Brenda staring intently in my direction. Our eyes met for a moment, and she whispered something to Jared. He tensed but nodded. Now they were heading towards me, weaving between tables with snacks and waiters serving drinks. Their appearance at this ceremony was a real surprise. Very unpleasant, it is worth admitting. I thought that I had let go of this situation a long time ago, that this chapter had become just a part of the past. But seeing them together, so smug and successful, stirred up something in me that reminded me of an old pain. However, it was no longer the same unbearable, acute agony, but rather a phantom pain. It's like an amputated limb has been hurting for a long time. Oh my God, they're coming right here, Dana whispered, clutching her glass tighter. Can we move to another room? No, I said firmly. I won't run away. Not this time. Dana nodded approvingly and squeezed my elbow in support before walking away to a group of our mutual friends, pretending to be her name. I knew it. She'll be watching from afar, ready to rush over if needed. Natalie, darling, sang Brenda with that distinctive intonation that I've known since high school. That's what she said when she was going to sting more painfully, pretending to be having a friendly conversation. What an incredible meeting. I was wondering, are you coming or not? What's up? How many years? How many winters? She prettily adjusted her diamond chandelier earrings, as if casually drawing attention to them. On her ring finger shone a ring with a stone the size of a walnut, probably worth as much as a new SUV. Her manicure was flawless, and her skin was glowing after a course of expensive treatments at the Beverly Hills Spa. Jared stood behind her with a frozen smile, his hands in his pants pockets. He still avoided direct eye contact, but I noticed a nervous twitch at the corner of his lips. "I'm doing great, Brenda," I replied, glad that my voice didn't waver and sounded even a little colder than I expected. "I see that everything has worked out for you, too. You look great." "Oh, you have no idea how good," she purred like a cat that has reached the cream. "Jared, say hello to Natalie. Don't stand there like a statue." He finally said, and his voice sounded a little hoarse, as if he had been silent for a long time. "It's good to see you." "Yes, everything is fantastic with Jared." She pointedly took his arm, as if fearing that he might run away. "You should have seen our penthouse in Soho. We just got back from a trip to Abu Dhabi. Can you imagine? We bought an apartment there with a view of the Al Bahar Tower. What a view on the 35th floor. And before that we were in Hawaii. I have never seen such white sand anywhere else." She spoke loudly, clearly counting on others. Several guests were already openly listening to our conversation, pretending to be engrossed in the canapes. Jared is now working with very powerful people. I can't even name names. Commercial secret, but you've probably seen their names in the Fortune 500 magazine rankings. Everything is of the highest quality now. The car was replaced with an executive-class Lincoln sedan. We only fly business class on vacation. Do you know what they say? We are not rich enough to buy cheap things. She laughed her clear, slightly forced laugh and gave me an appraising look, glancing from my hairstyle, which I made myself, to the shoes I bought at the seasonal sale. My modest cobalt-colored dress, purchased at an ordinary department store, obviously did not make a proper impression on her. It wasn't a designer's creation, but it suited me, emphasizing my eye color and slender figure, which I maintained through regular swimming lessons. "And you're still the same," she said with mock sadness, not hiding her patronizing notes. "The poor thing has always been a loser. I heard you still work for the same public relations firm. Are you still renting an apartment somewhere in Queens? No offense, but I always knew that you and Jared weren't a couple. He's ambitious, and such men choose their appropriate companions." She smiled meaningfully and leaned her shoulder against Jared. He kept a straight face, but I noticed him wince slightly when she squeezed his hand harder. "You see, we live luxuriously, and I can give him what he really needs. Not just in the bedroom." She lowered her voice to a stage whisper, which, however, was perfectly audible to the guests standing nearby. "But also in life. Connections, useful acquaintances, high status. It's also important for career growth." By the way, my aunt, the deputy CEO of a large investment company, introduced Jared to the right people, and now he has clients from the most prestigious circles. "How are your parents in Austin? Are they still working on their ranch, growing pepper?" The air between us seemed to sparkle with tension. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dana nervously shifting from one foot to the other, ready to intervene. The guests around him fell silent. Many did not even try to hide that they were listening attentively to our conversation. I felt a flush of shame and indignation rise to my cheeks. He wanted to say something harsh, to hurt her, to put her in her place. I smiled, sincerely this time. "I'm really happy for you," I said, and I was surprised how much it sounded like the truth. "You know, I have to thank you. You did me a huge favor 5 years ago." Brenda raised her eyebrows. At that moment, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that he had entered the hall. My heart skipped a beat and then began to beat at a feverish pace. "Oh, and here's my fiance," I said, waving my hand, and noticed how he immediately smiled when he saw me. He was a little late. There was a very important meeting today. "Let me introduce you to my future husband." I glanced briefly at Dana, who was already approaching us, and she winked at me like an accomplice. She was well aware of who he was, and she couldn't wait to see the couple's reaction. He crossed the reception hall with his casual, confident gait, holding a glass of sparkling wine in his hand. Several people along the way tried to stop him for a short conversation, but he kindly apologized and continued to move towards me. I watched Brenda's expression change from condescending curiosity to vague confusion. When he came up and stood right next to me, placing his palm on my lower back in a possessive but gentle gesture, I watched with satisfaction as the smile slowly faded from Brenda's face, and her eyes widened in shock and recognition. She paled and then blushed, clearly not knowing what to say. Jared just froze with his mouth slightly open, unable to believe what he saw. That's, Brenda muttered, looking from me to my companion in a daze. Because my future husband was Spencer T. Harris, a man whose name never left the front pages of financial newspapers and weekly publications, the head of one of the country's largest medical conglomerates, the owner of a network of modern healthcare facilities from Seattle to Miami, an honorary doctor of medicine, a member of the National Academy, and more recently, a White House consultant on health issues. The same Harris whose photo in a formal suit graced the cover of the latest issue of Fortune with the caption, "Visionary Transforming American Medicine." Exactly the kind of person Jared, as an ambitious lawyer, could only dream of meeting personally, whose location would open the doors to a completely different world of clients and fees. "Good evening," Spencer T. Harris said in his deep, modulated voice, accustomed to performing in large halls. He held out his hand, first to the numb Jared and then to Brand. "Natalie has talked a lot about you. Nice to meet you." He was perfect. A perfectly fitting suit, custom-made on Savile Row. Expensive but discreet cufflinks, a Swiss brand wristwatch that only true connoisseurs could identify. No ostentatious luxury, just impeccable taste and dignity of a person who does not need to demonstrate anything. Jared mechanically shook the proffered hand, muttering something unintelligible. His face paled, and his eyes darted feverishly, as if he was trying to figure out how this acquaintance could be turned to his advantage. The professional habit of a lawyer is to always look for benefits. Brenda was literally speechless, looking at us as if she had seen a ghost. Her mouth dropped open, and the jewelry she was so proud of a moment ago now seemed like cheap jewelry against the background of the authority and influence that Spencer radiated, even in the casual atmosphere of the wedding reception. I noticed that several of the guests in the hall, recognizing Spencer, whispered among themselves. One even hurriedly took out a smartphone to secretly take a picture of a celebrity. One of the waiters, an elderly man with a neat mustache, came up to us and said with the deepest respect, "Mr. Harris, I didn't expect to see you here. My wife had an operation at your Park Avenue clinic last year. You literally brought her back to a full life." Spencer smiled warmly. "Glad to hear it. How is she feeling now?" "Fine. She's already taking care of her grandchildren." "That's great. Give her my best wishes." This short dialogue finally got to Brenda. Her face took on that special shade that people have when they realize they've made a big mistake. "Mr. Harris," Brenda finally managed, nervously fiddling with the edge of her designer handbag. "It's such an honor. I read about you in the Wall Street Journal when they wrote about insurance reform, and I saw your televised lecture. At that time, you were talking about the availability of medical services in rural areas." She was frantically looking for topics to talk about, trying to make an impression, but her voice was trembling treacherously. Jared stood next to her, smiling tightly and frantically trying to figure out how to make the most of the situation. I could almost feel the gears turning in his head. Can Harris become his client? How would I get his business card? What do I need to say to be remembered? Spencer nodded politely at Brenda's babble, but it was obvious that I was the only one who existed for him at that moment. His arm is around my waist, the warmth of his body next to me. All of this gave me confidence that I hadn't felt in a very long time. He looked at me with that special look that spoke more than any words and made my heart skip a beat every time. "Yes, I remember that lecture," he replied calmly to Brenda. "It's nice that you're interested in our industry." There was an awkward silence. Brenda clearly wanted to continue the dialogue, but she couldn't find the right words. Jared cleared his throat and tried to take the initiative. Mr. Harris, I have heard about your speech at the annual economic forum. Very impressive ideas for attracting private investment in healthcare. By the way, I specialize in medical law and— We have to go, honey, Spencer interrupted him gently, turning to me. There was no trace of arrogance in his voice, just a delicate reminder of the time. They are waiting for us at the Presidium. The toasts will begin soon. Dana asked us to say a few words to the newlyweds. Of course, I replied, and then turned to the frozen couple. It was nice to see you. I wish you all the best. We headed to the main table under the gaze of dozens of eyes. I could feel Brenda boring into my back, and I smiled inwardly, not maliciously, but rather with a slight sadness about how our relationship might have turned out if she had made a different choice 5 years ago. Are you okay? Spencer asked softly when we were out of earshot. More than enough, I replied, giving his hand a little squeeze. Thank you for coming. I know how busy you are. I'll always make time for you, he said simply, and those words were the whole point of our relationship. But where did this amazing story come from? How did I, an ordinary girl, the former fiance of a modest lawyer, end up next to one of the most influential people in the country? It all started exactly 5 years ago. In the middle of a sweltering New York July, Jared and I celebrated the anniversary of our relationship that day. He booked a table at a popular restaurant in Greenwich Village and gave me a gold bracelet from the Ballard Jewelry House. And Cohen talked a lot about our future. I was absolutely happy and had no idea that very soon my life would shatter into pieces. I worked as an economist for a medium-sized company that imported high-tech laboratory equipment. Nothing supernatural. Standard office work from 9 to 5, moderate salary, regular social package. But I was impressed by the friendly team and the opportunity to sometimes participate in international industrial exhibitions. Jared was an aspiring lawyer in a law firm with an excellent reputation on Wall Street. He specialized in corporate law and had just started getting independent cases. The income was unstable, but the prospects seemed promising. We met at the birthday party of my college friend Timothy at a karaoke bar in the East Village. Jared then brilliantly performed Jack Spring's hit All I Need, and for some reason it made an indelible impression on me. At first sight, a spark passed between us. We chatted all evening, forgetting about karaoke and the birthday party, and the next day we met at the Starlight Diner Cafe on Houston Street. Jared was tall, fit, with an open smile and ambitions that literally shone in his eyes. He came from an intelligent family. His father taught political science at Columbia University. His mother was an associate professor at a medical college. He inherited intelligence and a thirst for knowledge from them, but added practicality and a healthy ego to this. He had just started specializing in mergers and acquisitions and dreamed of starting his own practice. Every evening, he told me about his affairs, clients, and legal conflicts. I didn't know much about these subtleties, but I listened attentively, asked clarifying questions, supported him, and believed in him unconditionally. I liked his determination, sharp mind, and sense of humor. It was easy and exciting to be with him. He took me to exhibitions at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Modern Art. We read Jonathan Franzen and Stephen King together, and we argued about Terrence Malick's cinematography. On weekends, we rode bicycles in Central Park or Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Sometimes he cooked his signature dish for me, lasagna, and I honestly thought it tasted better than any Italian restaurant. Our relationship developed like clockwork. Dating, meeting my parents, and taking a vacation together in Missouri. We barely scraped together a week in a modest cottage in the Ozarks and then a marriage proposal. By that time, we had been dating for 2 years and were confident in each other. The offer was romantic, like in a movie. A restaurant with a view of the Hudson River, a white tablecloth, candles, a bottle of California Cabernet, and suddenly, a ring and a glass of wine. I admit, I was so moved that I didn't even consider the jewelry. Then I noticed a small but flawless diamond in a classic setting. Jared spent almost the entire bonus he received for winning the case on him. I know it's not as luxurious as I would like, he said then, feeling nervous. But this is just the beginning. In 7 years, I'll give you something that will make everyone gasp. I'm going to be the best corporate lawyer in New York. You'll see. And I believed it unconditionally. My mother, a former English and drama teacher, has already started looking at options for the wedding reception called banquet halls, found out the prices. Jared and I were discussing buying an apartment, a modest one in a new apartment complex on the outskirts of Jersey City, but our own. We went to credit institutions, found out the terms of the mortgage, calculated how much we needed to save monthly. By the time she's 45, she'll be all ours, Jared joked, but there was only a grain of humor in his joke. Brenda came into my life long before Jared. We studied together from the first grade at a regular public school in Buffalo. We sat at the same desk, did our homework, and shared our first secrets. It looked something like this. I did algebra for us, she did history. I was a quiet, excellent student, she was the leader of the company. Different, but inseparable. It was Brenda who supported me when my father died of a heart attack at the age of 55, and I helped her when her first boyfriend dumped her because of her own infidelity. I didn't know that at the time, thinking that my friend was an innocent victim. No important event was complete without both of us. I always thought our friendship was forever naive. Brenda worked as a paralegal's assistant in an office on Madison Avenue. Paperwork, even though she always dreamed of something more glamorous. Having grown up in a family of middle-income civil servants, she dreamed of luxury from childhood, cut out photos of expensive bags and dresses from magazines, and followed the lives of celebrities. In college, she dated only wealthy men, but she didn't have a serious relationship. She was too openly showing her mercantile interests. Jared knew about our friendship and treated it with respect. When we first started dating, he even asked Brenda for advice before buying gifts for me. The three of us often got together, went to the movies for premieres, went on picnics in the mountains in the vicinity of New York State, celebrated holidays, Thanksgiving, birthdays, Valentine's Day. The brand was its own, proven over the years. I didn't notice anything suspicious or didn't want to notice. Now, looking back, I remember the little things that should have alerted me. Too many stares, casual touches at the table, Brenda's special smile when she talked to Jared, the way she began to dress more seductively when she knew he would be there. Her questions are about our relationship, whether we're okay, whether we're tired of each other. "So many years together, isn't it boring?" she once asked over a glass of wine. "You're practically married already. Aren't you afraid that the passion will go away?" I joked, not realizing that these questions are touchstones, exploration of the soil. Or maybe she just didn't want to see the obvious because she believed a friendship like ours is indestructible. Everything changed when Jared was offered to run the business of an influential entrepreneur, the owner of a chain of construction stores, accused of financial fraud. It was his chance to prove himself, an opportunity to make himself known in the professional community. Before that, he had mostly minor cases, divorce proceedings, labor disputes, minor commercial proceedings. And here's a client with money and connections, ready to pay well. Jared literally lived this business, often staying in the office until late at night. He only showed up at home to sleep for a few hours, take a shower, and rush back to work. I supported him as much as I could. I cooked dinners that he often didn't have time to eat, washed and ironed his shirts, and silently endured the cancellation of our plans at the last moment. Our meetings became less frequent, our conversations shorter and more superficial. I convinced myself that these were temporary difficulties, that everything would get better when the trial was over, that I just needed to get through this period. "Honey, you know how important this is to me, to us," Jared said, smiling guiltily. "If I win this case, I will be promoted to partner. This is a completely different income level. We will be able to get a mortgage on a better apartment than we had planned." And I understood, or thought I understood. But Brenda suddenly began to show an extraordinary interest in his career. She worked as a paralegal and allegedly wanted to change her specialty, go into defense. At least that's how she explained her sudden interest in the legal intricacies of financial law. "Natalie, do you mind if I stop by Jared's office?" she asked casually one evening as we sat at the street coffee on Lexington Avenue. "I want to see how everything works in a law firm. Maybe this is my calling too." Of course, I didn't mind. Why not? Brenda has always been fickle. She often changed jobs, looking for herself. I was just glad that she was finally thinking seriously about her career. She began bringing Jared specialized books that she allegedly borrowed from the law school library, helping him find precedents and preparing lunches for him at the office. "You've got your hands full," she told me with a disarming smile. "But I still work next to his office. It's not difficult for me." I was just glad that my best friend was so supportive of my fiance. The two people closest to me found a common language. What could be more beautiful? "He's just exhausted, Natalie," she told me with a worried look when we met over a cup of latte. "You should have seen how hard he works. He spends late at night poring over documents, even forgetting to eat. He needs support. You're too busy at work. So I'm helping as much as I can. We're friends, right?" We were friends until that unfortunate text message arrived. Now, I often wonder, was it an accident or not? Maybe she wanted me to find out. Was this part of her plan? We had dinner at my house that night. It was a rare occasion when Jared got off early. I made his favorite steak with potato gratin. I bought a bottle of excellent red wine, which we saved for special occasions. For dessert, there were strawberries with whipped cream. I remember it as clearly as if it was yesterday. After the meal, Jared went to take a shower, and I stayed to clear the table. His mobile phone was left on the kitchen counter, and suddenly it vibrated with an incoming alert. The screen lit up, and I accidentally saw the sender's name and the beginning of the text. "Brenda, it was awesome yesterday. I want to repeat." I wasn't going to spy. I wasn't going to, but my hand reached for the phone on its own. One look. What's wrong with just looking at it? The full message read, "Yesterday was awesome. I want to repeat it. Tonight at 8 p.m. at my place." My heart seemed to stop, and then it started pounding so hard that my ears were buzzing. Fragments of memories flashed through her mind. Brenda bringing lunches to the office, Jared staying late, their long phone conversations, her new dress, which she bought just like that. Everything was forming a ruthless mosaic. I didn't make a scene. Why shout, cry, demand explanations? Everything was already very clear. I silently packed the most necessary things into a small gym bag, took off the wedding ring from my finger, and put it on the table in the hallway. I left a short note next to it. "I know everything. Be happy." When Jared got out of the shower, I was already out of the apartment. I got in a taxi and went to my parents' modest two-bedroom townhouse in the Bronx, where I grew up. Mom opened the door, looked at my face, and understood everything without words. She just hugged me and escorted me to the kitchen, where she poured hot tea and took out a bottle of sedative. "We'll talk when you're ready," was all she said. Jared called every 5 minutes. I didn't answer. He wrote dozens of messages that I deleted without reading. He came under the windows of his parents' house, rang the doorbell, but his father would not let him go beyond the threshold. He tried to explain himself through mutual friends, assuring them that it was a stupid mistake, a momentary weakness, that he only loved me and was ready to fix everything. I didn't believe it. Maybe I could forgive an affair with a stranger, casual drunk sex, but not betrayal with my best friend, not months of deception. It's not the fact that the two people closest to me so easily and shamelessly deceived me behind my back. 2 weeks after our breakup, Brenda called me. That was the only time I answered the phone. 3 weeks after our breakup, while scrolling through the Instagram feed that I had planned to delete but kept putting off, I came across a photo that literally made me sick. Brenda, with a beaming face, showed off a ring with a rather large diamond on the background of the Statue of Liberty. The ring looked more expensive than the one Jared had once given me. I said yes. "The happiest day of my life," the caption read. And Jared was standing next to me with a tight smile that I knew all too well. It was the way he smiled at official events when he was bored or embarrassed. I've been looking at this picture for a long time. At first, everything inside was boiling with pain and rage. Then a strange numbness came. And then, unexpectedly for myself, I laughed. There was so much hypocrisy, pretense, and a desire to show everyone how happy they were. Brenda has always loved to make an impression, to create the illusion of a perfect life. And now she had a new prop for it, my ex-fiance. I have blocked them both on all social networks and messengers. I deleted the shared photos and threw away the gifts that Brenda had given me during our long-term friendship. I wanted to erase them from my life completely, without a trace. Our mutual acquaintances tactfully avoided mentioning this situation in conversations with me. Some tried to justify them. Love is evil. You cannot command the heart. Maybe they're really meant for each other. Others were outraged, taking my side. Still others were just watching from the sidelines, like watching a reality show. As a result, I distanced myself from almost everyone who knew us as a couple or a trio. They got married a month later. A modest ceremony in a small circle, without the invitation of mutual friends. Again, I found out about this by chance from a colleague who was related to Brenda's cousin. Imagine your friend married some lawyer. Weren't you at the wedding? That day, for the first time, I got really drunk alone in my rented apartment on the west side of Long Island. I bought a bottle of expensive bourbon, which I had never drunk before, and methodically emptied half of it, washing it down with tears and bitterness. The next morning, I woke up with a terrible headache, but strangely drained, as if alcohol had washed all the emotions out of me. I looked at myself in the mirror, puffy eyes, pale face, tangled hair, and realized that I didn't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want the betrayal of two people to determine my fate. The betrayal of my best friend and fiance broke me. It's true. I quit my job, stopped contacting my friends, and spent my days lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling or mindlessly flipping through social media feeds. My parents were horrified to see me fading away day by day. Dad wanted to have a manly conversation with Jared, but I forbade it. I didn't want any showdowns. It was my mom who insisted that I change my environment and reset my life. She was always a practical woman, never got sentimental, and believed that any problem could be solved with concrete actions. Go to Boston, she said, sitting next to me on the couch and resolutely turning off the TV, where I was watching an old sitcom for the 100th time. Aunt Doris has an empty room in her condo in Beck Bay. She's been inviting you to visit for a long time. Take a walk through the museums, get some fresh air. You need to get out of this state, my daughter. New York is too small. There are memories around every corner, and then you can start from scratch. I didn't care. To Boston, so to Boston. What difference does it make where to suffer? But Mom was persistent. She bought me a ticket for the Asilla high-speed train herself, called Aunt Doris, packed my things, escorted me to the carriage, hugged me tightly goodbye, and said, "Don't rush back. Find yourself there anew, and remember, no matter what is done, everything is for the best, even if it feels like the world has collapsed." I nodded, not believing a word of it. What is for the best? How can betrayal be for the best? I obeyed simply because I didn't have the strength to resist. In the end, I had nothing to lose, and this decision changed my whole life. Boston greeted me with a chilly wind and drizzling rain, the perfect weather for my mood. Aunt Doris, Mom's older sister, an artist, lived in an old building with high ceilings near Newbury Street. Her 3-room apartment was littered with canvases, paints, and some fancy crafts. Unlike Mom's neatness, Aunt Doris's was a creative mess. "Make yourself comfortable, Natalie," she said, showing me a small but cozy room with windows to the courtyard well. "There are no rules, no obligations. Stay at home if you want. Walk around the city if you want. I often go to the plein air, so you'll be a full-fledged hostess here." I really didn't leave the house much for the first 2 weeks. I lay on my bed, stared at the ceiling, read random books from my aunt's library, tried not to think about the past, but the memories came back with renewed force every time I closed my eyes. Then came the realization that it couldn't go on like this. I had to move on somehow. To begin with, find a job. I updated my resume and sent it to several companies. To my surprise, a week later, I was invited for an interview at a small but promising company engaged in the import of high-tech medical equipment. My experience working in New York in a similar position came in handy. We need someone to help with the paperwork in a new area, said David O'Connor, the firm's director, a plump man in his 50s with a good-natured face. We are opening a major contract for the supply of equipment for a new medical center. There will be a lot of work, but we will also pay well. I got this job, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that there was some kind of support, purpose, and meaning in my life to wake up in the morning. The staff turned out to be friendly, the tasks were interesting, and the salary was higher than I expected. Gradually, I began to come to life. I began to go out for walks around the city, discovering its beauty and grandeur. Boston charmed with its historical power, strict lines of avenues, unexpected cozy squares. I loved leisurely walks along the Charles River embankments, quiet evenings in small cafes with views of ancient bridges, and long hikes through museums. Aunt Doris, seeing my changes, once suggested, Natalie, I teach watercolor painting courses for beginners at the community center. Why don't you come by sometime? It helps to take your mind off heavy thoughts. I agreed more out of politeness. I've never considered myself an artist. She drew mediocre at school, and she didn't show much interest. But in class, I suddenly got carried away. The process of mixing colors, watching them spread across the paper, creating unique patterns was strangely soothing. In those moments when I was painting, thoughts of betrayal receded. It was at one of these classes that I first met him. Spencer T. Harris came into the studio as we were finishing our lesson, a tall, handsome man in an immaculate suit, with noble gray hair at his temples and attentive eyes. It stood out among the creative audience in the studio like a luxury SUV among compact cars. "Doris, I'm sorry to intrude," he said to my aunt. "I wanted to discuss with you the design of the lobby in the new department of the clinic. Do you have a couple of minutes for me?" Aunt Doris nodded happily and introduced him to us as an old friend and patron of our studio. As he left, he looked at my watercolor, a modest sketch with a view of Boston Harbor. "You have talent," he said with a slight smile. "There's something authentic about this work." I was embarrassed and mumbled my thanks. Aunt Doris later told me that Spencer is a well-known doctor, professor emeritus of medicine, owner of a network of private clinics, and a very influential person in the city. He helps young artists a lot, sponsors exhibitions, and commissions paintings for his clinics, she explained. It's a rare case when a successful entrepreneur is genuinely interested in art. A week later, the unexpected happened. The director of our company called me. "Natalie, I have an interesting suggestion for you," David O'Connor said with a mysterious smile. "Do you remember that big contract we were working on? So, the clinic for which we supply the equipment belongs to the Harris Holding, and he's personally interested in your resume, wants to offer you a position in his company." I was stunned. Why the sudden interest? Is it really because of my watercolor? It seemed absurd. "On Friday, a presentation of the new equipment will take place at the Holdings headquarters," the director continued. "You're coming with me. This is an excellent chance for you." The presentation took place in a modern business center in the financial district of the city. I was so nervous that my hands were shaking. Spencer greeted the guests, was attentive and charming, but carried himself with the calm dignity of a man accustomed to power and influence. After the official part, he came up to me. "Natalie, if I'm not mistaken, is an artist with the talent of an economist or an economist with the talent of an artist?" "Rather the latter," I replied, surprised that he remembered me. "Don't be modest. Doris showed me some more of your work. Impressive for a beginner." We started talking. He asked about my work experience, my move from New York, and my impressions of Boston. He listened attentively and asked clear questions. I gradually relaxed, forgetting about my initial fear. "I really have a suggestion for you," he said at the end of the conversation. "I need someone to help coordinate the work of the new clinic unit. You are suitable in terms of experience and qualifications. Think about it. This is a serious step up the career ladder." I took the card he handed me and promised to consider the offer. Already at home, looking at the thick, cream-colored card with the embossed logo of the holding, I could not help thinking that there was something more behind this offer than just professional interest. And I was right. After I accepted the offer and started working at the holding company, my relationship with Spencer began to develop. At first, these were business dinners where work issues were discussed. Then, an invitation to the premiere at the Boston Opera. Then there will be an exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts, a yacht ride along the Charles River in the evening, dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Golden Dome of the state capitol. He was attentive, but unobtrusive, smart, but he didn't flaunt his intelligence. He had a subtle sense of humor and knew how to listen. I felt protected and important around him. He wasn't trying to impress with wealth or status. He didn't need it. His self-confidence was based on real achievements and inner dignity. Our relationship developed gradually, without haste. He knew about my past. I told him everything one evening when we were sitting by the fireplace in his country house. Spencer listened to the story of betrayal without interrupting, and then simply said, "They did you a favor without realizing it. Otherwise, you would never have been here, and I would never have met you." 6 months into our relationship, he proposed to me. Without pathos, without grandiose gestures, just having dinner at your favorite restaurant. And I agreed, without a second's hesitation. Our wedding was planned for the fall. None of my New York acquaintances knew about this. I have deliberately limited communication with the past. It was all the more surprising to receive an invitation to Dana's sister's wedding. Dana was the only one of my New York friends with whom I kept in rare contact. She never condemned me for my disappearance, sometimes wrote on social networks, and was interested in my life. I appreciated this delicacy. "Natalie, I understand that this may be difficult," she said, calling me, "but my sister and I really want to see you at the wedding. I miss you, and I want to meet your fiance about whom you talk so little." I doubted it for a long time, and then I decided, why not? 3 years have passed. I've been sick for a long time. I'm happy in my new relationship. What should I be afraid of? "Okay," I replied. "We'll be there." "Only Brenda and Jared will be there?" "No, of course not," exclaimed Dana. "What are you doing?" I would never. But she was wrong. Or maybe Katie, Dana's sister, really invited them at the last moment, as she claimed at the wedding. Anyway, fate decreed that we met again. And I don't regret it, because now I know for sure that everything that happens to us makes sense. Even betrayal and pain lead to true happiness. After meeting with Brenda and Jared, Spencer and I joined the rest of the guests at the main table. The newlyweds were beaming with happiness, the guests were toasting, the orchestra was playing something romantic. I could feel dozens of eyes directed in our direction. No wonder, because the appearance of Spencer T. Harris was a real sensation for this New York wedding. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, while the guests listened to another toast. "We can leave if you're uncomfortable." "It's okay," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, it was the truth. "Let's stay. I like it here." After a while, when the dancing started, Dana came up to me. Her cheeks were flushed either from the champagne or from excitement. "Natalie, you have to tell me everything," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "How? When? Why don't I know anything?" "It's a long story," I smiled. "Not for a wedding party." "Did you see their faces?" she whispered, nodding toward Brenda and Jared, who were sitting in the far corner of the room with sour expressions. They're still in shock. Brenda married him because she thought he was going to be a big shot. But in fact, he's just an average lawyer. I heard they have money problems. She likes to live big, but his earnings are not enough for her needs. Dana had always been a bit of a gossip girl, but now I didn't feel annoyed by these revelations, rather a slight sadness at the thought that Brenda didn't seem to have changed. "He was trying to get a job at a large company, but something didn't work out," Dana continued. "And this apartment in Miami, which she called everyone about, turned out to be rented for the duration of the vacation. Just showing off as usual. And you're doing great, such a man. And you look amazing yourself. You're happy. I was really happy, not because my life was more successful than Brenda's and Jared's, or because of my status or financial situation, but because I had someone next to me who made me feel real, who valued me not for my looks or social connections, but for what I am. Later in the evening, when most of the guests had already left and the rest had broken up into small groups, Jared suddenly approached me when I was standing alone at the buffet table. Natalie, can I talk to you? What is it? He asked, visibly nervous. His face was haggard. There were wrinkles in his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, and his hair was streaked with early gray. Of course, I replied calmly. I wanted to apologize for everything that happened back then. It was dishonest of me. Dishonest. What a ridiculous, inappropriate word to use to betray the person you are going to spend your life with. You know, I've often thought about you, he continued, about how things could have turned out differently. With Brenda and me, it's not an easy relationship. There was such an undisguised longing in his voice that I felt sorry for him. He looked like a man trapped in his own choice. Jared, it's been a long time, I said softly. Life goes on. I'm all good. I hope everything gets better with you and Brenda, too. At that moment, Spencer came up to us. He put his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was both protective and a sign of belonging. Is everything okay, sweetheart? What is it? He asked, looking at Jared carefully. Yes, we're just talking, I replied. Jared was just wishing us happiness. Jared nodded nervously and held out his hand to Spencer. I'm really happy for Natalie. She deserves to be happy. Spencer shook the outstretched hand and said with a slight smile, We totally agree on that. When Jared walked away, I noticed him heading towards Brenda, who had been watching us from across the room the entire time. She said something sharply to him, and they began to argue quietly but furiously. Not the happiest couple, Spencer remarked. It looks like it, I agreed. But, I no longer feel anger or resentment towards them, only sympathy, I guess. He put his arm around my shoulders, and we went out onto the restaurant's balcony. New York stretched out before us with lights and avenues. The warm summer wind brought the smells of flowering lime trees and exhaust fumes, a strange but characteristic combination for the capital. When we met, you were like a wounded bird, Spencer said thoughtfully, with a broken wing, but with such a desire to fly. Do you know what won me over about you? Not beauty, although you are very beautiful, and not talent, although you have it, but strength. The power of the spirit that allowed you to start all over again, not to break down, to find a new path. I clung to him, feeling my heart pounding. I love you, I said simply. An hour later, we left the celebration. In the car, heading to the hotel, I recalled the events of that evening and thought about how bizarre life was. 3 years ago, I was heartbroken. I thought my life was ruined. And today I am grateful to fate for every tear shed back then, for every sleepless night, for the pain and disappointment, because it all led me to where I am now. When we returned to Boston, I finally realized that this was my real home, the city that had given me a second life, a new love, and a newfound self. Our wedding took place in September in a small manor house on the Atlantic Ocean. No pomp, just the closest people, delicious food, live music, and a sea of flowers. Mom was crying with happiness. Aunt Doris proudly introduced her student and beloved niece to everyone. And the father, usually restrained in showing his feelings, got emotional and made such a touching toast that even the waiters shed tears. Spencer, my husband now, was beaming with happiness. He was attentive to my parents, charming with the guests, but he didn't leave my side for most of the evening, as if he was afraid that I would disappear. A month after the wedding, I accidentally came across the news on the internet. Lawyer Jared Smith has become a defendant in a particularly large-scale fraud case. According to sources close to the investigation, his client, the same businessman he once defended, accused him of colluding with the opposite side. The case went public, and Jared's career was practically destroyed. I showed the news to Spencer. Do you know about this? He read the article carefully and shook his head. No, this is the first time I've seen it. But something doesn't add up in this story. Such accusations are usually made when they want to get someone out of the way. Your ex may have enemies. I shrugged my shoulders. I don't know. We haven't talked for a long time. Anyway, it's not our problem, he concluded, closing the page. If you want, I can find out the details. I have acquaintances in legal circles. No, I replied after a moment's thought. The past must remain in the past. And I really thought so. My new life was filled with love, interesting work, and creativity. I became the head of a charitable foundation at my husband's medical holding company, which helps seriously ill children receive modern treatment. She continued to paint, now more seriously, under the guidance of professional artists. She was planning a solo exhibition at a small but prestigious gallery on Newbury Street. Spencer and I traveled a lot, discovering new countries and cultures. He was an incredibly busy man, managing a holding company, consulting in government, teaching at a medical university, but he always found time for us, for our shared breakfasts, long conversations in the evenings, spontaneous walks along the embankments. I was really happy. And when, 6 months after the wedding, I found out that I was pregnant, my happiness became absolute. Spencer, upon learning the news, began to cry. It was the first and only time I saw tears in his eyes. It was then, looking at his touched face, that I finally realized my sweet revenge has come true. Not because everything is bad with my exes, but because everything is good with me. Really good. Pregnancy has changed my life. Spencer took such care of me that sometimes it even made me smile. The majestic, always collected head of the medical holding company turned into a worried future father who personally checked every test, invited the best specialists for consultations, and could rush to the convenience store in the middle of the night for pickles, which I suddenly wanted. You're overdoing it. I laughed when he called for the third time that day to find out how I was feeling. I have the right, he replied seriously. At my age, such happiness is rare. He already had an adult daughter from his first marriage, Elizabeth, a 32-year-old heart surgeon who worked in California. We met shortly after we got engaged. I was afraid of this meeting, expecting hostility or jealousy, but Lisa turned out to be a surprisingly warm, open person. She hugged me the first time we met and said, "It's good that Dad is finally happy." When she found out about our unborn child, she was thrilled. In the 5th month of pregnancy, Spencer and I decided to spend a few days in New York. He needed to attend a medical congress, and I wanted to visit my parents, who flatly refused to move to Boston with us. We've lived in New York all our lives, Mom said. Our friends, habits, and cottage are here at last. At our age, change is hard. One day, while Spencer was busy at the Congress, I decided to take a walk around the center. Golden autumn is the best time in New York. I was walking through Greenwich Village, enjoying the rustle of falling leaves under my feet, when I suddenly heard a familiar voice. Natalie, this can't be happening. I turned around and saw Brenda. She looked much worse than at the wedding, haggard, with a dull look and unkempt hair. Her expensive coat looked rumpled, and there was almost no makeup on her face. Hello, Brenda, I said calmly. You. She hesitated, clearly not knowing how to start a conversation. You look great. Thanks. I involuntarily put my hand on my noticeably rounded stomach. Her gaze slid down, and her eyes widened. Are you pregnant? Congratulations. There was sincerity in her voice, mixed with a kind of longing. We were standing in the middle of an alley, two former best friends whose lives had diverged so dramatically. How are you? I asked unexpectedly for myself. She shrugged, then laughed nervously. To be honest, it sucks. Jared and I are getting divorced. You've probably heard about his problems." I nodded. "Everything fell apart," she continued bitterly. "First the scandal with the client, then the debts, then—" She broke off. "Anyway, now I'm trying to start all over again." She returned to her parents. "I'm looking for a job." She spoke abruptly, nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. "I keep thinking," she said suddenly, "how could things have turned out differently? If I had then, if you and I—" She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood what she meant. "You can't change the past, Brenda," I replied softly, "but the future can always be rebuilt." She looked at me for a long moment. I often think about how we were friends at school. It was real. What I did to you is unforgivable. I understand that you will never be able to forgive me, and I'm not asking for it. I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I regret it every day." I looked at this woman with whom I had spent half my life, whom I had once loved like a sister, who had betrayed me in the most painful way, and suddenly I felt the last remnants of resentment dissolve, giving way to compassion. "I've forgiven you, Brenda," I said softly. "I forgave you a long time ago. That doesn't mean we're going to be friends again, but I don't hold a grudge." Her eyes filled with tears. She made a move as if she wanted to hug me, but stopped, hesitating. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've always been better than me, kinder, more honest." We exchanged phone numbers, more out of politeness than with any real intention of communicating. But this short conversation left me with a strange feeling of completion, as if the last page of a book that I hadn't been able to finish reading for too long had closed. In the evening, I told Spencer about this meeting. He listened attentively and then asked. "Peace," I replied after a pause. "It's like I let go of the last load that I didn't even realize I was carrying." He hugged me, placing his palm on my stomach, where at that moment our baby decided to remind me of himself with a particularly strong push. "You see," he agrees, Spencer smiled. "That's right. We need to live in the present, not the past." 2 months later, our son, Michael Spencer Harris, was born. 8 pounds of happiness with fluffy dark hair and serious eyes so similar to his father's. The birth was easy. The doctors at the clinic where I gave birth tried harder than ever, knowing who the father of the child was. Spencer cried when he held his son in his arms for the first time. Lisa flew in from California the day after giving birth, showered us with gifts, and immediately announced that she was taking a 2-week vacation to help with the baby. My parents arrived a week later when we were discharged from the hospital. When my mother saw my grandson, she said, "It's all settled. We're moving to Boston. I can't imagine how I can live away from this miracle." Life with a small child turned out to be both more difficult and more beautiful than I could have imagined. Sleepless nights, constant anxiety, physical fatigue, and incredibly overwhelming happiness from every smile, every new movement, every moment next to this little man. Spencer turned out to be an amazingly caring father. Despite the workload, he found time for his son every day. He bathed him, read fairy tales aloud, walked with a stroller on Boston Common. Photos of Michael appeared in his office at the clinic, and in conversations with colleagues, phrases were increasingly slipping through. "And my son yesterday." A year after Michael was born, another important event happened in our lives: the opening of a new children's clinic, a project that Spencer had been hatching for several years. It was not just a hospital, but a whole medical campus with the most modern equipment, the best specialists, and a special atmosphere where children were not afraid of doctors. I took an active part in the development of interior design at the clinic. Aunt Doris and I, who unfortunately passed away a year before our daughter was born, leaving me her apartment and paintings, and a group of young artists painted the walls of the wards and corridors with fabulous stories, created play areas, and did everything to make young patients feel at home, not in a hospital. The opening of the clinic was attended by high-ranking officials, journalists, and doctors. Spencer made a touching speech about how this clinic is his contribution to the future, his legacy for his son, and all the children of America. I stood aside, holding Michael in my arms, and looked at my husband with pride and love. He created something important, something that will save lives for many years to come, and I was happy to be a part of it. That evening, when we returned home after the grand opening, Spencer suddenly said, I'm thinking about retiring a little bit, handing over part of the management of the holding company to the board of directors. I want to spend more time with you. I looked at him in surprise. Are you sure? Clinics are your life. No, he shook his head. You are my life. Clinics are just a part of it, important, but not the main thing. At that moment, I realized that our story was just beginning. There was still so much to come: joy and difficulties, discoveries and disappointments, victories and perhaps defeats. But the main thing is that we will experience it all together. Sometimes fate gives us strange gifts. What seems like a tragedy can be the beginning of the happiest period in your life. Loss can turn into gain, and betrayal can lead to true love. I think this is the true meaning of sweet revenge, not in gloating over other people's failures, but in building your own happiness in spite of everything. It's about proving not to others, but to yourself. You deserve the best and get the best. Michael and Vera grew up, delighting us with their successes and discoveries. When my son turned 10 and my daughter turned 3, we decided to take a long trip to Europe. For 4 months, we traveled through Italy, France, Spain, and Germany, staying in small towns, visiting museums and castles, swimming in the sea, and getting to know the local culture and cuisine. By that time, Spencer had almost completely moved away from the operational management of the holding, reserving only strategic decisions and the development of new areas. He devoted most of his time to his family and scientific work. He wrote a book about modern approaches in medicine based on his many years of experience. This trip has become a special time for us. No rush, no calls or meetings, just the four of us discovering new horizons. Michael kept a diary where he recorded his impressions and pasted photos. Vera collected pebbles and shells in each new place, putting them in a special box. Spencer and I enjoyed the opportunity to be just parents without titles and regalia. One evening, as we sat on the terrace of a small villa in Tuscany that we had rented for a month, Spencer suddenly said, I think we should consider moving. Not forever, but for a few years. Where to? I was surprised. To Switzerland, he replied. Lisa has been calling us for a long time. There's a wonderful school for children, clean air, and a peaceful life. And I could consult at the clinic where she works. I've been offered this several times already. I thought about it. Moving to another country is a serious step, but on the other hand, it would be a new experience for all of us, especially for children. What about the parents? I asked. They won't be able to move in with us at that age. We will fly to Russia often, Spencer said, and they will be able to stay with us as long as they want. I've already considered this question. We discussed the pros and cons for a long time, and then decided, why not give it a try? There is only one life, and you need to live it fully, without fear of change. 6 months after returning from the trip, we moved to a small town near Geneva, where Elisa bought a house for us with a view of the lake and mountains. The children quickly got used to the new school. Spencer enthusiastically took up counseling at the clinic, and I continued to do painting and charity work, now on an international scale. We lived in Switzerland for 3 happy years, and then returned to Russia because we realized that the real home for us is still here in St. Petersburg, with its white nights, drawbridges, special air and atmosphere. Life went on with its joys and sorrows, ups and downs. The children grew up. Spencer and I tried to keep up with them, constantly learning something new, discovering new horizons for ourselves. Sometimes I thought back to my old life, Moscow, working as an economist, my relationship with Jared, and my friendship with Brenda. These memories no longer caused pain, only a slight nostalgia for my youth and some surprise. Was it really me? I felt so different now. One day, Michael, already a teenager, accidentally saw an old photo of me with Jared and Brenda. Mom, who is this? He asked curiously. I told him briefly without drama, just like an episode from the past. He listened attentively and then said, I think you need to thank them. For what? I was surprised. Well, if they hadn't done that, you wouldn't have met Dad. You wouldn't have moved to St. Petersburg. Vera and I wouldn't be here, he reasoned with adolescent directness. So their betrayal turned into happiness for you. This is the real revenge. Yes, I hugged my son, marveling at the wisdom in his words. He was right. My sweet revenge has come true. Not because they're not doing well, but because I'm doing well. Not because I gloated over their failures, but because I learned to be happy in spite of everything. And that's probably the main lesson I've learned from this whole story. True happiness lies in the ability to let go of the past and build a new life, your own beautiful and meaningful life. The years passed. Michael graduated from high school with a gold medal and, to the surprise of everyone, chose medical school. I want to continue my father's work, he said. Spencer was moved to tears, although he tried not to show it. Vera showed outstanding musical abilities, played the piano, sang in the choir, and participated in city competitions for young talents. I turned 45, the age when many women start to panic because of wrinkles and gray hair. But I felt happy and harmonious. I had a loving family, an interesting job, and creative work that brought joy. My charitable foundation has helped hundreds of children receive the necessary treatment. My paintings have been exhibited in galleries in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and even Paris. Spencer, despite his 73 years, retained mental clarity and amazing vitality. He no longer practiced medicine, but continued to consult, speak at international conferences, and write scientific articles. His authority in the medical community was indisputable. That year, we decided to organize a big family celebration, the 20th anniversary of our wedding, to gather all the relatives, the children, Lisa with her husband and 2 teenage sons, my parents, friends, colleagues, people who have become a part of our lives over the years. For the celebration, we chose our country estate near St. Petersburg, a cozy wooden house in the style of Russian Art Nouveau with a large garden overlooking the lake. A week before the celebration, Dana called me. We have maintained a rare but warm communication all these years. Natalie, you won't believe this, she said excitedly. I saw Jared yesterday. My heart skipped a beat, not from excitement or pain, but from surprise. I haven't thought about him for a long time. And how is he? I asked calmly. It doesn't matter, Dana sighed. I've completely lost it. He looks older than his years and can barely move. I heard that he had health problems, something with his heart. He's alone now, working in some small office as a legal advisor. We talked for a while. He asked about you. About me? I was surprised after so many years. Yeah. He asked if you were happy, like your children. I told you a little bit. He listened with such, a strange expression on his face, and then he said, tell her that I'm happy for her. I'm really glad. And added, tell her thank you. Thank you for what? I was also surprised and asked him. And he replied, for making her prediction come true. She once said that I would regret it, and I really regret every day of my life. I was silent, not knowing what to say. So many years have passed, so much water has flowed away. He asked me to tell you that he sincerely wishes you happiness, Dana added, and that you and Spencer are the perfect couple. He saw your picture together in a magazine, in an article about a charity event. After this conversation, I sat on the veranda of our country house for a long time, looking at the lake and thinking about the vicissitudes of fate, about how one event can change your whole life, about how betrayal can turn into happiness and dreams don't come true the way you planned. I didn't feel any malice when I learned about Jared's fate, just bright sadness and gratitude. After all, if not for his betrayal, I would never have met Spencer, would not have given birth to Michael and Vera, would not have found my true calling. I might have lived in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan, been the wife of a successful lawyer, but I would never have known the deep, all-consuming happiness that I am experiencing now. That evening, when Spencer and I were sitting in the living room, I told him about Dana's call. You know, he said thoughtfully, fate often sends us trials not to break us, but to set us on the right path. Perhaps this person should have played a role in your life in order to bring you to me. You're my philosopher, I smiled, kissing him on the cheek, not regretting getting involved with a woman with such baggage. Each of us comes into a relationship with our baggage, he replied seriously. But what matters is not what came before us, but what we created together. And we have created something beautiful, my dear. The day of our 20th wedding anniversary celebration turned out to be sunny and warm, despite September. The guests started arriving in the morning. Lisa and her family arrived from Switzerland. My parents came from their apartment in the center of St. Petersburg, where they now lived. Michael rushed over from Moscow, where he was doing an internship at the clinic. Vera fussed in the kitchen in the morning, helping the cook prepare the festive table. Spencer, contrary to his usual calmness, was nervous as a young man. He ordered a huge bouquet of white roses for me, exactly the same ones I had in my wedding bouquet 20 years ago. He put on his best suit, combed his hair especially carefully. You're beautiful, he said when I came out to him in a light blue dress that I had ordered especially for this day. As beautiful as on our wedding day, even more so. The party was a great success. The tables set in the orchard under the apple trees were bursting with treats. Champagne flowed freely. There were toasts, memories, and jokes. Michael played guitar and sang songs of our youth. Vera performed a piece on the piano that she had composed especially for us. Lisa's sons entertained the guests with magic tricks they had learned for the holiday. In the evening, when the dancing started, Spencer invited me to waltz, our dance, which we danced at our own wedding. Despite his age, he moved easily and gracefully, confidently leading me around the makeshift dance floor. Do you know what I'm thinking? He asked as we whirled around to the sound of an old tune. That 20 years is just the beginning. We still have so many interesting things ahead. Of course, I smiled. After all, the grandchildren will go soon. Don't rush things, he laughed. Let the children finish their education in peace. We danced, and it seemed to me that time had stopped, that everything around us is a decoration, and real life is only here, in the circle of our hands, in the rhythm of our dance, in the beating of our hearts. When the music stopped, Spencer raised a glass of champagne and made a toast to all the guests, to life, which sometimes presents us with surprises, for the fate that leads us down the winding paths to true happiness, and for the love that only gets stronger every year. I looked at our family, our friends, and the whole world we had created together, and I thought, here it is, a real sweet revenge. It's not about seeing other people's failures, but about being absolutely, unconditionally happy yourself. At the end of the evening, when most of the guests had already left and the rest had gone to their rooms, Spencer and I went out to the shore of the lake. The water was as smooth as a mirror, reflecting the stars and the full moon. A cool breeze rustled the leaves somewhere in the distance, near the hill. Thank you, Spencer said, putting his arm around my shoulders. For these 20 years, for the children, for what you are. Thank you, I replied, snuggling up to him. For giving me a real life. We were standing by the lake, two middle-aged people who had traveled a long way together. There were many more years ahead, hopefully happy ones, although of course not without problems and difficulties. But we were ready to meet them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The sweet revenge of fate was that the betrayal that had once caused me such pain eventually led to real, deep happiness, to a life that I would not trade for anything else. I smiled up at the stars and mentally thanked everyone who had played a role in my life. Jared, Brenda, Aunt Doris, and everyone else.